Hey guys, it's Casey, and while September for a lot of people is really exciting because, you get to go back to school and you get to see all your friends again, it's also a very serious time because it's Suicide Prevention Month. You see on the news all these stories about teenagers committing suicide, especially queer youth, because of bullying, and they really only show you the exceptional cases. That 13-year-old boy who hung himself, or, the college student who got filmed and outed, and then committed suicide. And because these stories they're only airing the you know what I mean, the sensational stories, it makes it very separate from what's going on in your life and the people around you, and you sort of get this feeling that it only happens in exceptional cases. It only happens when someone gets kicked out of their house and rejected by their family, or it only happens to teenagers, or it only happens to certain people, and it would never happen to you or your friends. It's this issue that you will never have to deal with. But that's not true at all. A family friend of mine committed suicide. The death was ultimately ruled accidental because they couldn't prove it was actually a suicide because he didn't leave a note. But friends and family knew. How can you not know? But the fact that it was ruled accidental left lots of people without closure. It left lots of people questioning whether they really knew what happened to this person. And I've never really been that closely affected by suicide, but I do know that it happens, and it happens to normal people. It's not something that's happening so far away that you can't deal with it. It's not something that happens, on the other side of the world. It happens here. It happens now. Someone around the globe commits suicide every 40 seconds. So I'm doing a video about suicide and about statistics of suicide in Canada, mostly because I didn't know any of this stuff, and it's Suicide Prevention Month, so it's a good time to teach yourself and to learn about the fact that this happens all the time, every 40 seconds. Over the course of this video, so far, a person has committed suicide, or attempted it, at least, and, I don't know how to talk about it. No one wants to talk about it. It's this stigmatized thing that, unless it's this sensational story, that no one really wants to delve into why it happens, why we let it happen, how we can stop it. And we can. The suicide rate for Canadians is 15 per 100,000 people. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. Those rates are really only for the general population because they climb for specific groups. For queer youth, for bullied kids, for people of different races in mostly white communities, for teenagers in high school, for struggling families, for the poor, for the elderly. Those numbers, they just keep climbing. Suicide rates keep climbing in Canada, and between 1997 and 1999 there was a 10% increase in the overall number of suicides across Canada. Men commit suicide at a rate 4 times higher than that of women, but women are more likely to have multiple suicide attempts, and women are more likely to be hospitalized due to suicide attempts. Studies indicate that there is a significant correlation between a history of sexual abuse and the likelihood of someone trying to commit suicide. This correlation is twice as strong for women as it is for men. In Canada, suicide accounts for 24% of all deaths between the ages of 15 and 24. Suicide is the second leading cause of death between people ages 10 and 24. Yes, 10. People as young as 10 are committing suicide. The number of documented suicide attempts has risen 14% since 2001. Despite a commonly held myth that the Christmas season has the highest suicide rate, there are studies that are showing that this is actually the time when people are least likely to commit suicide, although the depression rates are very high around December and January. Studies suggest that while the holidays can bring up some very difficult emotions, they're also tend to invoke feelings of familial bonds and friendship and love, and these feelings may act as a buffer against suicide. July, August, and September have the highest number of suicides in North America. This tends to be for younger people, especially people who will be returning to school. Can you imagine being so scared of returning to school, of facing your peers, that you would rather kill yourself than go back to school? I can't. I really, really can't. But there are so many people that feel this is the only option for them. And it's not. So who's at risk? People with a physical disability or a mental illness, people who abuse drugs or alcohol, people who are experiencing major loss or grief, such as death of a loved one, or unemployment or divorce, people who are experiencing major changes in their life like teenagers and seniors, people who have a history of depression, suicide attempts, or who talk frequently about ending it. What are the danger signs? Repeated expressions of hopelessness, helplessness, or desperation. Behavior that is out of character, such as recklessness or changing how they act in stressful situations. Signs of depression like sleeplessness, social withdrawal, loss of appetite, loss of interest in their usual activities and interests. Giving away prized possessions to friends and family. Giving to charity in exorbitant amounts that they really can't afford. Making a will, taking out life insurance, or other preparations for death, talking about death, especially about suicide. But most of all, this is the one that no one tells you about, but a sudden increase in cheerfulness, or acting extremely happy when before they weren't at all, can be a major sign that someone is about to commit suicide. If someone is unhappy, they don't just suddenly get happy. They don't suddenly forget all their problems. Things don't suddenly get better. Getting better is a slow process. And if someone suddenly seems to have, this monumental elation, this sudden happiness that doesn't make any sense, that's a bad sign. So how do we stop it? How do we prevent a suicide attempt? How do we deal with this? How can we?